Hey, how's it going?
I'm so happy to be here.
Today I'm really excited to have you, Schereeya. Um, and actually I think you're my first guest from Substack.
Really
Yeah,
nice.
ever. Like ever.
Nice.
So I'm so excited because like I've been following you there and I don't know, you just have this like light about you. Um, Whether you're talking about something joyous or deep and dark, right? Um, I just love how you move me. Like your words just move me. Where like I'm so excited that I also have your poetry book here. And so yeah, so welcome.
Thank
So
you.
I know you are an artist, you're a writer, obviously you write poetry, and you also work in tech
It's
sales.
like sales. That's right.
Um, and so I feel like you're such a fascinating multi-hyphenate to chat about. So I guess let's get started in terms of like um, how did you get started in this creative process? And like, because I'm always interested in people who have this critical thinking side and also this creative side.
Right.
Is there something that actually like you share? Yeah, a process that works for like thinking in both directions.
Sure. Yeah. So I feel like I have considered myself both an artist and a scientist since like early elementary school. I had an interesting experience of like growing up in the church with in a really big like performing arts community. So I was like acting and singing and all of that very early. But I also really was into science, like at school. And so I was always kind of like, am I going to be an artist or a scientist when I grow up? Like, what are my options? And that like honestly led me all the way up through like in high school. I went to the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics, which is um, a really good high school. I won't lie. It's one of the best in the country. But it's also like you have to take a bunch of tests, like apply to get in, like blah, 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 blah. And I sort of decided early, like I want to be a scientist. Like I can always kind of act or write or whatever on the side. But North Carolina also has a school of the arts there as well that you can go to in high school. So even early, like it's always been like, am I gonna do the arts or am I gonna do science? Like, what's it gonna be? And I don't know. I think like technology has always been interesting to me. And so I kind of leaned that way. And I just remember like maybe fourth grade learning about the scientific method specifically. And this idea that you can like observe the world around you, ask a question, come up with some fun thing to answer that question. So an experiment of some kind. And then collect data, right? And like crunch that information and ask new questions. And that just became the way that I look at the world. Like that's just how I engage with the world in general from a very early age. And now that I have my own kids, like side note, but now that I have my own kids, like I try to bring that up with them too, like asking, like, what did you observe about these things? What do we notice about this? Talking about plants and all that stuff. Because I think it just builds such a great framework for like trying to understand the world. Um, and that like that scientific framework kind of tips over into the creative, which I also consider the divine. So for me, like always having doing that acting and things on the side, it just got to a point where it was like, okay, well, I'm having kids, I can't always be on a play, like what am I gonna do? I guess I can write. That's sort of, you can write, you can carry your notebook, I can write poems on my phone, I can have my laptop wherever. The other part of this that is like kind of a very long story is that I started writing this novel that I have been working on for like almost 20 years at this point. Like I started this also sort of in high school, working with kids. So again, to bring in like a bunch of my like my lived experience always informs both the questions I'm asking about the world and the art that I'm making and creating. So I grew up as a Black person, queer but didn't know it, neurodivergent but didn't know it, like in North Carolina, in the rural South too, right? So like farms and donkeys and cows on the way to school, like that kind of that kind of thing. And we had a military base, so it's also a very like American nationalist, like just like an interesting stew of things to be the place where I was learning how to make sense of the world, right? So I started like I was working with kids, some like at-risk kids, some of the most creative people I've ever spent time with, and it became this thing where I started questioning like what if heaven was a place that you could physically go to? Like what if there is no difference between magic and science? Like, what if God is, I don't know, the sun or space or the moon, or like, what, you know, what if, asking all these questions, because again, I've always been very like science, art, like what is there a difference? Like, where does that line go? So I started writing this novel a very long time ago, and it was like, in true like perfectionist, nature, I wrote this first draft and was like, this is terrible. Like, I need to learn how to be a writer if I'm going to write this. Like, mind you, I had spent like 3 months, right? NaNoWriMo plus a couple of months, National Novel Writers Month, for like 3 months writing every day, like 150,000 words, like a full draft of a novel. And this was like 15 years ago. My thought was, this isn't good enough. So I was like taking writing classes. I was like, maybe I'll go to grad school. Like, I just have to figure out writing practice. So like, I was like, I know how to make an experiment. Like, I know how to ask a question and solve this problem. So I started reading all the, like, what do readers read? I was like reading up on like E.B. Strunk, right? And like, I was reading about like another book readers love to talk, or writers love to talk about, is Stephen King's On Writing. So I checked that out from the library. Like, I just started collecting data, is my point. Is like, what do writers do? What do writers know? How do I build a practice? And that sort of became a thing that around 10 years ago I started doing. So now I'm like, okay, I consider myself a writer. I can write poems, I write plays, I write like all this stuff, because I took the time to like break down the steps to find out like, what does it take to be a writer. So it's like very long story, but like, I've just sort of always been on that parallel track of like, what's the difference? Is there a difference between like art and science? And if I start trying to research what that difference is, like, that led me to writing. So yeah, I don't know, like, it gets a confluence of everything all together, and I'm always trying to figure out like, should I be holding these things separate, or can both, can both parallel lines of the track overlap? Where will that take us? And that's what I'm trying to figure out right now.
Wow. Wow. I mean, whew, there was a lot there. I mean, I feel like I can ask you 10,000 questions right now. But first, I want to thank you for, you know, telling us your rich, like, background, right? Like, especially you mentioned growing up in the South and like the rural South. And as you know, this week is Juneteenth. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and just like also you as a scientist, I mean, like in my professional research work, um, that's really all I study are like emerging scientists, how
Okay.
people think like scientists. So
Oh,
actually,
nice.
I wish like I was doing a study with you on this. This is amazing. Did you have like people in your childhood who kind of instilled this scientific way of thinking?
Yeah, yeah. So my mom was always kind of like me. She says, where she was like, she went to college on an engineering scholarship and then graduated with an English degree. so, so she, she kind of was always that person who would who would take me on nature walks and be like, what questions do we have about the world, right? How are we digging deeper into really trying to understand the nature of things, or again, the divinity of things. I grew up in the church, like my parents were pastors, but my mom is always much more like, both of them have always been more spiritual than religious, right? So sort of towing the line between religion and witchiness. So that kind of started. And then her brother is also an engineer, and so when I was a kid, he would send big Lego kits that came with hard hats and little electric boards, or take me on field trips to his job and be able to look around at all the what are like little circuit boards and stuff like that. So it just really like piqued that interest in me. It sort of kept it going pretty early.
Wow. That's amazing having loved ones like family members who can really instill that curiosity and joy in
Mm-hmm.
science. So kudos to them.
Yeah, I'm really thankful for that. And I feel like actually, I feel like this is a good time to like kind of harp on being from the South, because so I grew up, I actually lived in Washington State until I was 10 years old, in a really diverse, full of like Asian Pacific Islander, indigenous people, Black people, white people, everyone, all in that neighborhood, in a really good school system. I got to go to like really nice schools. And then we moved to North Carolina when I was 10. And it was like, I could read better than all the kids in my class. I was doing math they hadn't done yet. It was like it was almost like a culture shock because education was so forefront of my life for so long. And then I moved to this place where like the school system was really trying to figure out No Child Left Behind. It's 2001. So it was rough. But so like I had this idea about this like idea of the rural South being a place where people didn't really have access to education and they weren't really that smart. It was like a whole thing. But my grandfather, who was like an old Black man who grew up in an even smaller town, like even more rural than where I grew up, education was always so important to him. Like he went to college. I wasn't a first generation Black student or like college student. So that they like that trickled down in my family. And it was always so important. Like if you go to family reunions, if we're all down in Jones County, like my family's name is Jones, we're from Jones County, like that type of Black people from the South, you know? But like even with that, it was like they believed in achieving your highest potential. Like they really believed in like you can read, we teach you how to read early, you can read, you can learn anything. So that like that was instilled in me very early, even as I was like kind of looking at the people around me like can you guys read, like are they teaching reading at school, like what are we doing here? So I do think that is like that's like such an important part of my story because a lot of especially Black kids from the South don't have that experience where you know their mom, their grandfather, even their great grandfather had access to education, and that's like a big part of my story.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that. You know, like I said, we're celebrating Juneteenth. Is that something that your family celebrated growing up?
Not growing up, actually, no, which I think is really interesting. I like knew what Juneteenth was, but actually my first like strong experience with Juneteenth was as an adult living in Washington, D.C. I was probably like 25 years old, happened to be walking out one day and it was Juneteenth. And this like Black guy with like dreads and like big headphones on a skateboard went by and was just like, Happy Juneteenth, my nigga. Like as he rolled by on a skateboard. And I was like, and so now I take off Juneteenth as a holiday, as a matter of course, every time since I'm like, no, this is my holiday. Like, had to sort of stop, do a bunch of like, because again, I'd heard about it. Like, I started, you know, emancipation of the slaves, but it wasn't like where I grew up, it wasn't like a big thing that we celebrated. Which is interesting because my dad's family actually is from Texas, and Juneteenth is like Galveston, Texas. Like, they were the last people to learn that the slaves had been emancipated by Abraham Lincoln. So it's like it took a long time for that information to trickle down. And so, you know, I think it's a really good like metaphorical or like a really good concrete explanation of this idea like none of us are free until we're all free. Like if some people don't know that they're out of slavery, is slavery over? So Juneteenth to me is like really that like, you know, it pumps it up. So now it is a big part. Like we celebrate with the kids, we read books about it, we talk about it, we got our little watermelon and fried chicken, which is like low-key stereotypical, but high-key actually good Black food. So you know, it's definitely more a part of my life now.
Wow, thanks for sharing that again. You know, I know you mentioned before the word neurodivergent, and that made me think about like in terms of also the way you process data since you were a kid.
Mm,
How do you think that has like impacted like how you see the world?
yeah. So as a kid, I was always like, people were always like, wow, like either you're so weird or I never thought of it that way. Like, or things like anytime I would talk, right, from a very early age, it's like, oh, like you have such a weird way of looking at the world, or like, I never thought of it that way, or huh, that never occurred to me. Like, just, I remember reading, probably also in fourth grade, actually, something about fourth grade science was like really pivotal for me. But I remember reading about like Albert Einstein and how they like he didn't have like this divider in his brain, like they, you know, researched him when he died and there's like there was no like barrier from left side of the brain to right side of the brain from keeping those ideas for crossing over, and that's what made Albert Einstein so creative and so out of the box. And I just really resonated with that from an early age, like something's going on in my brain weird. I bet if science could research it they'd find out like there's no, you know. So when I later learned about autism I was like, okay, me and Albert Einstein probably both autistic. Like there's like a scientific reason to describe that. Like it's just how I did, like, I can't explain. It's just like when I learn something new, it goes up in this like big scaffold that just holds all the information I've ever learned about the world. I don't really like I can zoom in, I can like decide to be like, what's all the information I know about trees, right? Like but like in my head, the information about trees connected to information about Jesus, about trains, about Spanish, about key, like, you know what I mean? Like all that stuff is interconnected and I can sort of access it all the time. But I feel like other people's brains don't work that way. So um so it like, yeah, there's a long time of just being like, I just observe a lot. Like I just, that's what science is to me, or data collection. It's like I can observe all of this information and then group it. I'm making patterns, I'm collecting it, I'm spreading it back apart. Like that was a thing I did in school with my snacks, like all the red M&Ms, all the green M&Ms, all the blue M&Ms.
Mm.
And, every time I meet a new queer person, it's like, did you grow up in the South? Did you grow up in the church? Like, are your parents queer? What, you know what I mean? It's like, do like slotting these, like, that's just how my brain works. So sometimes it can be overwhelming. And I think like writing for me is a big part of trying to make sense of categorizing that stuff. Like poetry, for me, poetry is, uh, it's like I can't talk about poetry. I can only write about it. Like I can access like I like open up the poetry hat and then all of a sudden like words that describe things pour out and I can like group them together into categories. And so when people are like, "Oh, like your words move me," I'm like, that means a lot to me because I actually spent a lot of time like picking the right words and how do they taste in my mouth? Like how do they feel? Like what memories do they evoke? Because a word to me isn't just the word. It's also every other emotion, feeling, and connection that my brain has made to that word in my whole life. Because somehow I remember most of them. So it's like it's like hard to describe, but for me, it is like my identity and my creativity, like very much tied up in my neurodivergence because that is how I process the world. Like I can't change that. I can't swipe out, it's not, you can't change it from Microsoft to Linux. Like I don't swipe from autistic to neurotypical. Like so
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. Well, I know here I have your book. Thanks, by the way. It's called Prayers and Pixies. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and in this poetry book, you mentioned this word, fair,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems like to be a good chunk of your identity. Can you tell us more about like what does that mean to you? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
what resonates about that word that you
So
identify?
yeah, talking about neopronouns. So fey fair are a type of neopronoun. Um, Neopronouns are like the ones we don't usually use. So he, she, they would be your kind of traditional pronouns. Neopronouns would be like z, zir, or em, or fey fair, which I like to use. My connection with fey fair actually is to go back to talking about like being a weird kid, like that kid who people always just were like, I don't like, I just don't know about them. Like I just don't like what is she like? She's always reading a book. Like he's always done that, like even as a kid, I was a very non-binary kid, like very like, please don't stuff me in this pretty dress unless I'm doing a pageant and then put all the makeup. You know what I mean? It was very like, anyway, so I always just felt really connected to this idea of stories of changelings, like the idea like the changeling, like fairy story. So in like Celtic mythology and other usually European mythology, although I think it comes up in a bunch of like a bunch of folklore groups, but this idea that like there was these kids who like maybe a fairy came in the night and swapped their healthy human baby out for like a sickly fairy child who's really sensitive to like the lights or always has like a headache or cries a whole lot, really colicky baby, and they grew up to be weird and just like stare out into the distance and always wondering about things and imagining, so I just like as a kid was really connected to this changeling folklore. And then as an adult, getting my autism diagnosis and doing all this research, I found out that there's like so much evidence to prove that those changeling folklore stories are really just people trying to describe early autistic children. And I'm like, see, it makes sense. Like it makes sense, this idea of being a fairy, like of being somehow otherworldly, of being like someone who got plucked out of a different universe and sort of placed into this one. And so when I learned that fae fair pronouns existed, I immediately like, I sort of glommed to them before I even made it all the way to he him. And I think that too is part of like gender is not something that we could bother to talk about in 15 minutes because it's so nuanced. But I will say that my gender identity is trans masc non-binary, which to me means like the hormones are boy. The testosterone gives me a level of like mental peace, physical stability, like health, activity, ability to just be present in the world that I never had before. And I like it when people notice that and they look at me and they're not like, oh, that's a girl, because that would be weird because most of the time I have a beard. Like, okay, not that women can't have beards, that's just not my experience. And like, have you met men? Who wants to be them? Not me. so so it's like, I think for me there's this experience of like my gender is, it's so much more ethereal than your average man, your average just human man. And so he him, while accurate, is not complete. And that's sort of where the fae fair comes in for me, is like it's able to really touch on like the fact that my gender is informed by my neurodivergence. Like it touches on the fact that I am frankly too ethereal for this planet and probably too hot for it too. I feel like fairy really gathers that up, And I think it also really like it really touches on the fluidity of my gender as well, where like while it does kind of always sit on the masculine side of things, like again, that's not complete. And so it gives me the ability to sort of play around there. And I almost never bring it up. It kind of only comes up in my writing where like I'll put it in an actual bio or something like that, because it's sort of hard to explain to people and ask them how to conjugate it and like try to get them to like it's the whole thing. So which I think also just speaks to the diaphanous ethereal nature of fairies. So yeah.
Wow. I love it. I love it and I love you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know you're a Leo, right?
I am.
Leo love
Actually,
love.
fun fact, I'm actually a Taurus. I'm a Taurus sun, and it is Taurus season now. So I'm like,
Hmm.
but I do have a Leo moon and a Leo rising. So it's like, I'm like, imagine if a Taurus was a Leo. That's me.
Yeah. Well, I'm an earth sign too. Like I'm a
Yeah.
Capricorn. Um, yes. Aries moon and Gemini rising.
Nice.
Don't ask me how that works.
Oh, you know what? I feel like it's probably working for you. Because like, okay, I mean, I know this is part of the recording, but I will drop my little witch hat with a little astrology moment here and just say that I love a Capricorn. I really do. Like the Taurus in me really sees the Capricorns, and Capricorns are like their own worst enemy. So I feel like having an Aries moon is probably keeping that worst enemy in check and making it work for you.
Or the other way, making it
Or
worse.
the other way. Strong point. A strong
Depends
point.
on the situation, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, sorry, I got like because like I feel like you're so like multidimensional. I'm like I have like 100 million questions in my brain. But I would say I think you're the first person I've met who used fair.
Really nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I also use neo pronouns actually. Yeah, because I'm like she, her, z's, or
Nice.
like that z. It just kind of rolls off my tongue.
Yeah.
But going back to you, I think one of the things being new to Substack, like I didn't start it till January when I started the show. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like one of the writings there that really resonated with me was something that you wrote. And it was about the I'm trying to remember the title, but it was something along the lines of the thing they don't tell you about being trans.
Yeah.
And I really love that because you focus on your experience and how it's more joyous than like what is usually portrayed out in the media of like this like super in like a deficit perspective.
Yeah.
So obviously I can like put on the writing a link to that Substack post,
Yeah.
but do you want to like, I guess, tell our viewers what you were trying to convey in your post there?
Yeah. What's really interesting to me about that post is that it was not planned. And it's also my biggest, like it like blew up. It like absolutely blew up. And I have all these like all these like planned, like really interesting articles, things I want to write about, stuff I want to get into that I just haven't. And that one was just like, I honestly can't even remember what inspired it, but I literally just like, I don't know. I think it was like I think it was the week, and this is terrible that I can't remember his name, but there was a trans mass person who was killed in New York, like New Jersey.
Mm, I remember that one.
And yeah, and I'm so sorry that I can't remember his name right now, but it um I think I had like taken a break from social media and I like hopped on real quick because I actually didn't even start my Substack till December, like literally a couple of weeks
Oh,
before
wow.
you're like one of the first people I subscribed to. um
I didn't
and
know that.
yeah, I just had all this old writing I've been saving for a while. Anyway, it I think I had this just like burst of like anger, like this burst of like righteous anger that was like I the way I handle anger is that it makes me like particularly articulate. Like you don't want to get caught when I get pissed off in the crossfire because it's like all the words I've ever learned suddenly are coming out at you like this. And so I was sort of like, I'm so pissed off at the world right now because like none of this stuff should be happening. Like we should not have Donald Trump. Like Elon Musk should already be in Mars, leaving us alone right now. Like we should not be dealing with any of these problems. And especially like all of the most amazing people I have ever met in the world are trans people, and they shouldn't be dealing with all the stress and the issues and the unaccess to like the world, like in the same way that the environment would be doing so much better if indigenous people were in charge of it. Like humanity's emotions and like ability to love and build community would be doing so much better if trans people could just thrive and be in charge of it. Like as a matter of course. So I think I was just so like I have to say something about this. And it made me very, I just get really like, I don't know, I think I get like extra eloquent and like sarcastic and kind of jabby when it's like I'm feeling angry. But it was like, I don't want this to actually be about like the problems of the world got all my attention and all of my eloquence and all of my whatever. Like I actually want this to be uplifting to the people that I'm trying to talk to right now. I want to share my experience. Oh, you know what actually really spot, like I'm thinking through now what this what actually happened is I opened up Snapchat on a random day in January and there was a picture like I had 3 Januaries in a row on that day. And so you could see, like, I could see myself having transition. Like the first one was before I started T, right after, a year after, and then 2 years after. And it was like, even though being trans is so stressful, because that all was around the same weekend of this trans man being killed, even though like it is so stressful, like I look good. Like I look the fuck good. I look good. I feel good. Like
Yes, you do.
when I look at that first picture of me 4 years ago, like I can see in my eyes that I hoped that one day I would look the way I look now. And I couldn't imagine. I didn't know what it would be. I just was like, I can't keep doing this. I have to do something different. And so being able to be like, actually, like, even though you can't imagine it forward, you can look back and appreciate. Like somebody needs to hear that. Like I didn't get to hear that. Somebody needs to hear that. So it was sort of like all of that all together. Like me being annoyed and irritated was sort of supplemented the sassy attitude of that particular article, but also me being like, actually, I'm so full of like awe and love at like my past self and my current self and any other person who goes through this journey, and especially all of those like pre-cracked trans eggs who are like, something's going on here, and I don't know if I have the time or the energy or the wherewithal to figure it out. Like, yes, you do, babe. Yes, you do. And we'll all be here on the other side when you figure it out. Like, that was really the goal behind that article, essay, piece.
Yeah, wow. I mean, it resonated with me, and that's why I was like shared it so much because
God.
it's definitely something that you don't hear a lot about because they
Yeah.
always focus on negative things.
Yeah.
And as
I,
someone, oh, go ahead.
I no, I do want to make one call out. Someone commented on this piece and it was a really, really important call out. Early on, I do try to point out like a lot of privilege that I have as a person, as a trans person, like a lot of black, there's no black privilege. Well, there is black privilege. Anyway, no, this is not what I'm trying to say. What I want to say is one thing I did not shout out is that because I am trans masculine, I do get a lot of trans masculine privilege, a lot of masculine privilege in a way that trans femme people don't always get. So I think the experience, especially around bathroom safety and around hormones and like friend group safety, I think that can sometimes be as scary as it sounds in the media. And so I do want to like, especially if probably different viewers, right, will be hearing this than maybe who have read that piece in the past. I do want to highlight that and just say that like it it is better than they want you to think, and it is still hard, especially for trans femme, especially black trans femme people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. Like it's not like, oh, let's not focus on the negative because like they do happen.
Yeah.
But I think it's
Let's talk about the whole picture.
exactly. It's more nuanced, it's more complex. There are like it's possible to thrive and be trans, right? And I
Yes.
think
Yes.
like you're showing that like on the day to day uh
Absolutely.
at your job. Like has that ever been an issue?
Honestly, no. I think my job is one of the reasons that this transition has gone so well for me, actually. Um, I started transitioning during a period of time where I was actually a stay-at-home parent, so I wasn't working, and it was the pandemic. Like it was pretty easy to be like, okay, people on Instagram, I'm non-binary, right? It was a lot harder at the first job, like when I first went back to work, to be like, I'm a she they because I need a job, even though I know I'm not really a she, but I don't know if you'll hire me if you know that I'm trans. And then being able to jump from that job to another job where when I started, I was like, I'm they them, and I'm telling my boss that maybe in a few months I will be using he, him. So everybody just prepare. And then actually what happened is I had top surgery. So when I went out for top surgery, because again, I love to be dramatic. I was gone for 2 weeks. And when I came back, I had switched everything to he, him, like he, him, and my pronouns and my signature. I had to email the IT to get them to change my name on all the, like all this stuff. I just like swiped it all over real quick. So when I came back at the start of the year after top surgery, it was like, Schereeya, he, him. And it took some people like a week or two to figure it out. One of them got fired, unrelated, but everybody else, everybody else got on board pretty quick. So like it actually, I was like, I think for me that was one of like the anchors during the transition, and a lot of the anxiety, and like even there's like a in the first like year or two of hormones where it's like you really just don't know which bathroom to use because like everybody perceives you a little bit differently. So it's like my safety, your safety. I don't like. Um, I think like, but just being able to literally like he him in Microsoft Outlook, and then you have all of my coworkers just jump on board too. Like I don't, yeah, it was so seamless. It was like, wow, it turns out that all that sexual harassment training they make you take when you start a new job, it works enough that people just figure it out. Like old white guys from Virginia, like random Midwestern lady, like they just figured it out.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, you think it's because of the industry that you're in? Because you're in tech sales, right?
Yeah, I work in tech sales. So I do think a lot of it is industry. I think tech likes to tout itself as being sort of at the forefront of like diversity and like blah blah blah. But part of that is one, tech is really accommodating to neurodivergent people, which whether you're diagnosed or not, like there are just so because like most neurodivergent people like to be behind their little computers looking around. So they often, you get to work from home, you get to code all day, you get to, or whatever it is that you do. And frankly, the numbers of neurodivergent people who are genderqueer are like 3 to 4 times the numbers of neurotypical people. So I think there is sort of just that amount of like, generally the people who work in tech are like, I'm here to solve a problem. I'm not here to fuck around. Generally, which I am thankful for. So I do think that is part of it, the industry. Part of it too is because I work in public sector sales. So we sell to the federal and state and local governments. And usually, current president notwithstanding, usually in the federal government, there are strong laws around like diversity, right? Like how many queer people are here, how many Black people, how many like women-owned businesses, like blah 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 blah. And so that level of like needing to keep compliant with those things means that we do have like again that training that everyone has to take at the beginning, which talks about pronouns and gender and blah 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 blah. You know what I mean? So there are like it's kind of weird to say, but there are those things in place that make it possible for people to just deal with it. Like, was everybody happy about it? I don't know. It's not my job to know. And I don't care. I did have a situation where we hired some new people, and I guess my boss had told them like all the details, was like trying to explain so they could have like the background information of like Schereeya's pronouns and like blah 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 blah. And so explain that I had had surgery and been out for it and like all this stuff. And it was like I did have to be like, don't do that. The new people literally don't need to know. Like,
Yeah,
they
just
need to know
know
that
my pronouns.
yeah,
Yeah.
like so, you know, and then he didn't do it again, and it was fine. So I think it's like I do happen to work for like it's kind of like I've worked for several tech companies, and this is one of the more low key ones I've worked for. Like everybody really is kind of like we're just here to be respectful. People are not trying to like bend you over backwards and like all this other stuff. Um, and it's my boss messaging me now. So and so you know I think like I do happen to work for a cool company where it just like that's not always the case even in tech. But yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons for it, but at the end of the day I think it is actually just that like people are just here to make money. Like they don't really care about they're like you can be this is the thing I heard you I don't care, people can be whatever they want, you can be called whatever you want, like as long as you come to work and do your job. I'm like great, because I also have bright green hair and hand tattoos and nobody has questions about that either.
By the way, I love your hair, and I didn't know you were gonna go all green today. Something told me to wear this today, and I feel
Yeah,
like we're kind of matching right now.
it's I think the spring vibes. It's also Earth Day, I learned this morning. So maybe that was maybe we were both channeling the Earth vibes.
With me, it was purely the color because I was gonna get a different set of bright colors.
Okay.
For some reason, I'm like, I don't know why I want to wear that one today.
Yeah. Coordination. I love it.
Yeah, yeah, and, we're gonna wrap up here.
Yep.
And you were talking about your job, and actually, that's something like we haven't talked about in terms of like what kinds of data information do you use at your job?
Oh yeah. Yeah. So I work in tech sales. I'm the business development manager for a pretty large software company. Not pretty large, but no. Anyway, so for me, the data actually, I use a lot of marketing data. So I use like I get to use CRMs, so various like online, you know, like Salesforce, HubSpot, various tools to like gather the data of information of people who might be looking at our website, people who come to our website, people who fill out forms. And so that's like the top of funnel for me is like what are we doing on the marketing sector, right? Like for me, an interesting part of the data too is like once you have done it long enough, or if you have like a good boss who can tell you these things, you learn that like a certain number of clicks leads to a certain number of forms, which leads to a certain number of meetings, which leads to a certain number of opportunities, which leads to a certain amount of closed business. And for me, it is like boring work stuff, but it's so interesting to be like I can actually sort of predict from a all the way down through the funnel to say this is my pipeline, this is how much I expect us to make this year if all things work out the way they're supposed to. And of course they don't, right? Of course people who don't answer phone calls, people who don't like show up, like who, you know, but it is really cool and helpful to have that framework. So that is a part of the data for me. And then another part, and the part that I think maybe I like the most, or the part that like really digs into the like business development portion, or and like thinking about like right now it's just me, but hopefully in a year or two I'll have other people who like I'll be their manager. But it's being able to think about like the activity. Like again, it's sort of annoying to be like I can distill the phone calls I send or call I make and the emails I send to certain numbers and be like, if I make 50 phone calls, I expect 12 people to answer and one person to make me and blah, 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 you know. But it is also cool that you can actually find the numbers because then it helps you predict things. It helps you like make plans. It helps you strategize. It helps me save time and be like, well, it doesn't make sense for me to send 500 emails the Friday before Easter because I know that in 4 years, no one has ever responded to an email that went out the Friday before Easter. So I'm taking the afternoon off. You know what I mean? Like I just it feels so nice to me to be able to like have access to that information and pull it together, crunch it up, and then come out with some kind of output. It's just like it's like fun. It's like even though it's sometimes tedious, even though it's not rocket science, like I wish it were, it's still kind of cool.
It is cool. Because actually when you were talking about the funnel and that cascade of events,
Mm-hmm.
right, and how you're predicting things or
Mm-hmm.
some outcome, I don't know, I just had this flashback of something you were talking about earlier when you
Mm-hmm.
were talking about you're collecting all this data and there's like different filing cabinets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I feel like in a way it's like it's very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I feel like, yeah, I mean, you're totally right that you are using it's your creative side and your, I guess, numbers side,
Yeah, like
critical.
the analytical side.
Yeah, it's not like this things that are like separate.
Right.
There it's
Nope.
happening all at the same time, all at once.
Yeah.
Right? It actually
Yeah.
doesn't make sense to think about it like separate thing because like
And even with Substack, actually, I think one of the things that I like a great advantage I have at Substack is it's the same idea of using that marketing data to better understand what types of posts should I be posting, what types of information get good feedback. People love poetry. I was not expecting that. I was not expecting to post a poem every day for like a month. The numbers don't lie. Like people like poetry.
yeah, I
Um,
do.
yeah, right. And it's like, but that's helpful. I wouldn't know that just throwing it out into the void, right? I wouldn't know that even on Twitter back in the day, like, or like I used to use Patreon a couple of years ago and they had some analytics, but it's like, it's not, that's not what it's exactly for, right? Substack is really giving you that information. And if you care to learn how to manipulate it, you can. And it's like, it's great. That's good for you.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, thanks Substack that we got to connect. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
yeah,
excited.
I mean,
Stay in touch.
yeah, exactly. No, and this is really like me wrapping it up now. I really enjoy learning more about you because this is our first conversation, believe it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I feel like I already know you. It's
Good.
like our 10th hangout. Um, but is there something that maybe we haven't covered or something you want to reiterate before you know, we part ways today?
I feel like we talked about so much stuff. Thank you for listening to me info dump, my favorite activity. I would say follow me on Substack, buy my poetry book. And I guess one thought I really had was just like if I had to kind of sum up my thoughts on data, it would be start early and often. Like talk to your kids about the scientific method very early. Like get your little kids into looking up earthworms in the dirt when they're 2 and they're like so tiny it doesn't even make sense for them to squat, right? Like that is like that's the peak age to start getting into making observations about the world. Like I like to think that's what humans were created to do, right? Like if you like to believe in the creation stories, pick your creation story, right? But if it's Adam and Eve in the garden and they're being told to like catalog all the trees and the plants and the whatever, like I think that's what we're supposed to be doing. And that's like that activity of like wanting to know more about the world helps us love the world more. Just like if we do it with people, like that helps us love them more. So I feel like we should all be doing it early and often.
Well, thank you for that advice to everybody. Yeah, so I guess um I will see you again
Around.
soon.
Here.
I'm always on Substack. And so
Right.
but yeah, I do appreciate you and I feel like you color my world and everybody else.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
No, thank you. Okay, well, happy Juneteenth and happy Pride.
Yeah.